Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Public Speaking. I'm your professor, Captain Chad Hayes. Tonight we'll be speaking on a topic which is very near and dear, could also be very controversial. I will try not to step on any of your religious toes, metaphorically speaking, but I am a biologist and I'm going to speak in terms of evolutionary theory. Our mastery of computers, fossil fuel engines, our mastery of tractors, all those sorts of things have given us power over the earth. We can literally change the scope of where we live to better suit it for us. We have machineries that do work for us. We have computers that think for us. We're smart enough to create these things, and we also have this wonderful opposable thumb which allows us to use these tools. Most all of these inventions have given us our ego as a human race. We are the masters of the world. We control everything that goes on. But it was just merely several thousand years ago where we were a functional part of the ecosystem. We were part of the food chain and not always at the top of it. I feel like our egos are not always appropriate because we are not alone in how we feel, how we think, and our intelligence. There are other animals on this planet that share the same characteristics as we do. Far too often we forget to look at them because we feel as if we're superior. So the title of this presentation is The Human Animal. I believe that we are indeed a type of animal. Several thousand years ago we were part of the food chain. We were just another animal trying to survive on this planet. One of my favorite quotes from Ralph Waldo Emerson is, "The lover of nature is he whose inward and outward senses are still truly adjusted to each other. His intercourse with heaven and earth becomes part of his daily food." Now, this makes me think of a Native American sort of mentality in which they were surviving and living off of the bounty of the land. They did not change the land. They only took what they needed to, and they left the rest alone. We have, in our modern society, become more of a taker versus a leaver. We change the landscape, take everything we can out of it, and we leave and start over somewhere else. But let's talk a little bit about just our overall history. We've reached our modern, what we call our anatomical modernity, about 200,000 years ago, which means the form that we are now, Homo sapiens sapien, came about 200,000 years ago. Our behavioral modernity reached around 60,000 years ago. Language, all those sorts of things, basically what we consider basic human characteristics. About 60,000 years ago. Agriculture was invented about 10 to 15,000 years ago. So right around the end of the last ice age, we invented this wonderful thing where we no longer had to adapt the hunter-gatherer mentality, where we followed around being part of the food chain, and we began to create our own food chain by farming, by growing plants and surviving off of it. It allowed us to stay in one area and provide enough nutrient for our family and ourselves to survive and thrive. Electricity and automobiles have only been around for a little over 100 years. Yet when you think about the Earth as being 4.5 billion years old, our society, everything that we consider to be these great things, are infants. We're just a grain of salt in a tub of salt. Very, very short in the time frame of how long the Earth has been here, how long the other creatures have been living and surviving with us. Recently, in 2003, we mapped the human genome. Many of you who might not remember some of your basic biology, a strand of DNA basically encodes everything that we are, what we look like, what we sound like, how we behave, how smart we are, how athletic we are. All that is written within a blueprint known as the DNA molecule. The mapping of the human genome has allowed us to not only better understand who we are, but who we were 100,000 years ago. It also enables us to create drugs to better diagnose illnesses, to treat illnesses. A whole lot of possibilities have been opened now that we know what the human genome means. One of the most important things is that we can look at the human genome and actually compare that with other genomes of other animals and see possible ancestry, where we came from, or basically what animals came from a common ancestor. And the genetic similarities between humans, chimps, dolphins, and pigs are unbelievable. When you talk about in terms of an amino acid sequence replacement, which is a random mutation that occurs that makes one species look different from another, it's a very, very small segment of your DNA chain. And really, if you look at a genome of a human and a dolphin side by side, there are just a few small changes in between the two that separate the two of us. So we're a lot more alike genetically in the genome than most people realize. We're very, very close. Physical similarities, obviously, that we share with many other creatures. The most commonly accepted theory as to why we began to walk upright, our primate ancestors, as they came down out of the trees, is called the savanna theory. Basically, they came down out of the trees. They were living on the savanna plains where there's tall grasses. And so they began to stand up periodically to look over the tall grasses. Bipedalism evolved as a result of standing up over and over. That's the most commonly accepted theory. And there's only a few animals on the planet that exhibit bipedalism. It's just thought that all those animals that do walk on two legs for a fairly substantial amount of time are in one way, shape, or form related to one another. And their genetic code actually shows that too. A second and less commonly accepted theory is known as the aquatic ape theory. It states that our primate ancestors, instead of climbing out of the trees and standing up on the plains, began to swim in an aquatic environment, developing various physical characteristics to suit that environment. A subcutaneous fat layer, nostril flaps to prevent water from entering our air passages, webbed fingers and toes. A lot of these signs and a lot of physical characteristics that we share with many marine mammals to this day. And you talk about overall mammalian characteristics, hair on our body, nursing young, warm blood. These are all characteristics, physical characteristics that we share with numerous species on this planet. Not only physically are we alike in many ways to many animals on the planet, behaviorally speaking, we're very similar as well. We're not the only animal on this planet, the only organism to have a very organized social structure. Ants and bees have an extremely complex structure. If you ever want to do some light reading, which is very, very fascinating, no real purpose in it, read about the life of bees. It's very, very interesting to find out how they function on a daily basis and how they function as a society for the betterment of the species. There's no inner turmoil. That's something we as humans could definitely learn from the animal world. Tool use. Several other animals have opposable thumbs. Many of the great apes and the lesser apes, the new and the old world apes, can use tools. Chimps have been seen pushing blades of grass into termite mounds to be able to get those little tasty termites out, little morsels of protein. Bottlenose dolphins in Shark Bay off the coast of Australia, off the Great Barrier Reef, have actually been seen using tools. Female dolphins will pick sponges up off the bottom and hold them in their nose to actually root around in the salt in the hard coral to prevent from cutting their nose to push fish out for their young. And it's only the female dolphins that are using the tools. So you ladies who always feel like you're a little bit smarter than guys, it's also reflected in the animal kingdom in many ways. Emotions. We're not the only animals that are happy or display joy and pleasure, happy or sad. Many other species also are happy and sad. If you guys have ever had a dog, when you come home, they're happy to see you. There's no mistaking that emotion. And I think for us not to anthropomorphize these animals is doing them a great service. We're not the only animal on the planet that exhibits emotions. This is Koko. Koko was a mountain gorilla that was studied very intensely for about 35 years, if I'm not mistaken. She was studied, it was somewhere up in Massachusetts where Koko lived. You guys may be familiar. It was during the mid-70s, early 80s when she actually passed away. Koko knew over 1,000 different words, and Koko could speak via sign language. She developed her own unique system of sign language with her trainer, also the biologist who was living with her and studying her. Koko could watch movies, and then you could talk to Koko after she watched the movie and ask her about certain scenes, and she would tell you that it made her very sad, the scene where the people were crying. These are emotions that in our fast-paced life, we're living on computers, we're driving cars, we forget how closely related we are to other animals on the planet. We are indeed an animal too. Of course, one of my favorites, the old golden retriever, considered to be one of the smartest, most popular breeds. We're not the only animal to actually recognize ourselves in the mirror. Now, I don't know what he's thinking. His eyes are telling me that he's kind of intimidated by himself there, but he's obviously recognizing that that is not another dog, that's his reflection. And this is not more evident, or probably even more evident in dolphins and elephants, what we consider to be some of the most intelligent animals on the planet. Dolphins not only can recognize themselves, but they will flip over upside down and do tricks so they see what they look like upside down. Some researchers down in Grassy Key, Florida at the Dolphin Research Center have actually put marks on the side of a dolphin. And then the dolphin went and looked in the mirror underneath like, what is that? Turn around to see what they had done to it. These are often characteristics that we consider to be human. And we often say, well, look at that dolphin. It's acting like a person. But can it be that we're all just acting very similar, or that we're all acting alike? not only good emotions, but they're also bad emotions. This is a gorilla this is actually a lowland gorilla, a little bit different species than the upper highland gorillas, mountain gorillas like Coco. But this particular gorilla lost her baby, and she sat there for many, many hours, shaking it, trying to get it to wake up. And then eventually she held it to her chest and cried for over 12 hours. I didn't want to show you those pictures because I didn't want anybody to get too upset. These are emotions that are not just specific to human beings. There are other animals on this planet that grieve for the loss of their young ones. And this is a picture of one of the dolphins that I've been studying. Her name is Sarah. For the serrated edge on the back of her dorsal fin, I can tell these animals apart based on the shape of their dorsal fins. And she was one of the first females in this group of 24 dolphins that I actually saw have a baby. It's a pretty cool time, too. She actually pushed this newborn calf, and you can tell it's a newborn based on the stripes that we see here. These are called birth rings. When they're in the mother's stomach, in the mother's uterus, babies don't come from stomachs. When they're in the mother's uterus, they're folded up in the fetal position. I was reminded by that several times. So it was folded up in the fetal position, just like we are in our mother's uteruses. And when the baby is born, wherever the creases or folds were, look like stripes, and they persist for about 3 weeks after birth. So you can age a calf. Obviously, this was just a few moments after it was born. Literally, we saw the afterbirth floating down the river that the other dolphins in the group had cleared away, and they were all surrounding this mother, holding her up so her head was out of the water so she could breathe, and let gravity help the baby to be born. And then when the calf was born, they pushed it up to the surface. Now, after that happened, not only did they push it up and hold it there so the calf can take its breath. Obviously, it's going to be living in the water for the rest of its life, so it's sink or swim, kid. So this is the point where they sink or swim, but most of them swim. And this is the wonderful point that where the group separated, she's seeing my boat coming down the river. Now, bear in mind, I've been working with this same group for a long time, and they know me and I know them. And she pushed this baby up to the side of the boat. The group parted, literally parted, and she pushed the calf up to the side of the boat where I was able to take this photograph. Very, very obvious to me, maybe not to the passive observer. She was proud of this baby and she wanted to show it all. 3 months after this photograph was taken, this calf was dead. I almost get choked up whenever I think about it, but it literally changed my life, my interaction with this female dolphin. Sarah met me at the dock one morning and she did not have her calf with her. I drove down to the inlet where this group normally feeds. It was an early morning trip, so I wanted to make sure they were there. She followed me swimming as fast as she could and swam up beside the boat after I stopped. I'd been running, about 20 miles an hour to get to the inlet, and she'd been keeping up with me. She swam beside the boat and began to chuff, which is they exhale rapidly. Over and over. She got my attention, and I turned and looked. By this point, coffee hadn't kicked in yet. I didn't realize, there's Sarah, where's her calf? I didn't realize that. But she broke away from the boat and began to circle something that was floating on a shallow sandbar. The water was just a couple feet deep, and I pulled up and waded over in the water, and it was her calf. I walked up to it, and instantly the scientist in me began to inspect this calf, looking at its teeth. Its stomach was inverted. It looked emaciated. It was still flexible. Rigor mortis hadn't set in yet, and so it had not been dead that long. But it looked, for all intents and purposes, as if it had starved to death. And the whole time I'm sitting there looking at this calf, inspecting it, trying to figure out what happened. Sitting right beside me in the water is Sarah, and she has this look on her face. She is begging me for help. There was no mistake in that look. And that one moment changed my entire life. It changed my scope. It changed my view on things. I'd always been an outdoorsman. I hunted, I fished, and animals were always beneath me as a human. Obviously, I'm smart. I'm the king of my domain. That particular morning in July, back in 2004, I realized that there are other animals that are just as intelligent as I am. And so I believe very strongly that we are not alone on this earth. We are not alone. So next time you go home, sit down and talk to your dog if you have a dog. If you don't, borrow someone's. Look in their eyes and see what they'll tell you.